It started like any other shift for Max Harper, the night DJ at WKRK, a small-town radio station that barely got any listeners past midnight. Max had been playing classic rock and taking the odd call from truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional conspiracy theorist. On this particular night, however, everything changed. As the clock struck 2 a.m., a burst of static interrupted the music. Max frowned and quickly checked his equipment. Everything seemed fine. He reached for the dial to switch back to the usual feed, but something stopped him. Amid the crackling interference, there was something different. A low, barely audible hum, almost like a whisper creeping through the static. Curiosity got the best of him. He twisted the dial slightly, and the hum grew louder. It wasn't just noise. Max could hear words, fragmented but undeniable. Help. Lost. Cold. Thinking it was some bizarre radio anomaly, he let it play, chuckling nervously into the microphone. "Well, folks, looks like we've picked up some spooky ghost talk on the airwaves tonight. Halloween come early?" His voice cracked as he tried to brush off the growing unease. But as the whispers continued, something else happened. People began calling in, a lot of people. Normally, Max would be lucky to get a couple of calls per hour, but now the switchboard was lighting up nonstop. Callers were panicked, some claiming they heard their dead relatives in the broadcast, others swearing they could make out familiar voices that shouldn't be there. "Max, I swear that's my grandma. She died 10 years ago, but I'd know her voice anywhere," one frantic caller yelled. Another whispered in fear, "I heard my wife. She's been gone for months." Max's hand trembled as he realized this was no joke, no glitch. He could hear it too now, clearer with every passing minute. Voices. So many voices, overlapping and murmuring just under the music, like they were crawling through the airwaves themselves. Some pleaded, others cursed, but all of them felt real, too real. Against his better judgment, Max kept the signal running. There was a magnetic pull to it, something irresistible in the voices of the dead. And strangely, listeners couldn't stop tuning in either. The station's ratings were skyrocketing, and social media buzzed with stories of people hearing messages from the deceased. Reunions with lost loved ones whispered through their radios. But soon, things began to change. By the third night, reports came flooding in about strange occurrences. Listeners who tuned in for too long started acting different. At first, they complained of headaches and dizziness, but soon their behavior became erratic. They mumbled incoherently, muttered words from the broadcast, and began isolating themselves from the world. Friends and family reported that the affected individuals stopped responding to them entirely, instead focusing all their energy on the eerie whispers from their radios. One caller, a woman named Sarah, spoke of her husband who had been glued to the radio for days. "He doesn't talk to me anymore. He just sits there, listening. His eyes, they're vacant, like he's not even there. Please, Max, you have to stop this." Max tried to pull the plug, but every time he attempted to shut down the broadcast, the equipment refused to cooperate. Even when he cut the feed entirely, the whispers persisted. They weren't coming from his station anymore. They were bleeding through the very air, worming their way into radios, phones, even televisions. The dead had found a way through, and they weren't going back. Then, the station phone rang again, but this time it wasn't a listener. It was a voice Max recognized all too well, his brother, who had died 2 years ago in a car crash. "Max, it's so cold here. Why did you leave me? Why didn't you come back for me?" Max's blood ran cold. His brother's voice sounded so close, so real, so angry. He slammed the phone down, but the voice didn't stop. It was inside his head now, inside the radio waves, inescapable. By the 7th night, Max was alone in the station, staring at the blinking lights on the console as the whispers filled the room. His reflection in the dark window seemed off, wrong somehow, like it wasn't really him anymore. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten, or slept, or done anything other than listen. The whispers grew louder, suffocating in their intensity. They weren't asking for help anymore. They were commanding, demanding. The voices of the dead had seized control of the frequency, and through it, they were pulling the living into their world. Max's reality was slipping away, and he knew it was only a matter of time before he too would be lost, consumed by the never-ending broadcast. But as his mind fractured, one final thought crossed his mind. What happens when they've pulled us all in? The radio crackled with static once more, and then silence. But for those still listening, the whispers never really stopped. It started out as one of those too-good-to-be-true internet rumors, a mysterious app that promised to show you the world as it truly was. No filters, no illusions, just reality, stripped bare. The app was called Second Sight. There was no official download site, no splashy ads, and it wasn't on any app store. It seemed to just appear on people's phones, shared through cryptic links and anonymous messages in forums. Ava Harris first heard about it from her roommate, Jordan. He was one of those tech-obsessed types who was always trying out the latest weird app, but even he was skeptical. "You won't believe it till you try it," he said one night, staring down at his phone with wide, bloodshot eyes. "It's like everything changes when you see what's really there. But, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have." Ava shrugged it off at first. Jordan was prone to exaggeration, always the dramatic type. But later that night, she noticed something odd. Jordan wasn't acting like himself. Normally chatty, he barely said a word at dinner and refused to make eye contact. He kept glancing nervously out of the window, as if he was expecting to see something lurking in the dark. When she asked him about it, he mumbled something about second sight, and how once you see the world behind the veil, it's impossible to forget. The next morning, Jordan was gone. No note, no texts, nothing. Ava figured he'd taken off for a few days, as he sometimes did when things got too overwhelming. But as the days passed and Jordan remained unreachable, Ava started to worry. Curiosity got the best of her. She found the link Jordan had left on his computer and downloaded Second Sight herself. The app installed itself without fanfare. No permissions requested, no tutorial. Just a single button on a blank screen. Activate. Ava hesitated for a moment, but the unanswered questions about Jordan and her own growing sense of dread pushed her forward. She tapped the button. The phone screen flickered for a moment, and then everything seemed normal. But as she lowered her phone, something felt off. Her apartment looked the same. Same furniture, same half-eaten bowl of cereal on the counter, but there was a strange, unsettling pressure in the air, as though the room itself was watching her. She held up her phone again, peering through the app's camera feed. That's when she saw it. In the corner of the room, just behind her bookshelf, something was crouching. Its form was twisted, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed faintly like embers. It wasn't solid, not exactly. It flickered, as if its existence was out of sync with the world around it. Ava's breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively lowered her phone. Nothing. The room was empty. Her heart raced as she raised the phone again. The creature was still there, unmoving, its eyes now locked onto her. Ava's skin prickled with fear. The app hadn't just revealed something hidden. It had shown her a nightmare that wasn't meant to be seen. But it wasn't just her apartment. As she looked out the window, she saw them everywhere. Creatures of impossible shapes and sizes, lurking in the shadows of buildings, beneath streetlights, even in the reflections of puddles. Some clung to the walls like spiders. Others prowled the streets like predators. And they all had the same predatory gaze, searching, waiting. She turned off the app, her hands shaking. But the memory of those creatures wouldn't leave her mind. She wanted to believe it was just a glitch, some elaborate prank coded into the app. But it felt too real. Hours passed, but Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every shadow seemed deeper, every silence more oppressive. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard soft, deliberate footsteps outside her apartment door. She barely slept, her ears attuned to every creak and groan of the building. The next morning she tried to delete Second Sight, but the app wouldn't budge. It had become part of her phone, integrated into the system. The more she tried to erase it, the more it seemed to cling like a parasite. Worse, the feeling that she was being watched only intensified. The creatures she'd seen through the app. They were out there, hunting, waiting for her to slip up. Desperate, she reached out to the forum where Jordan had first found the app. The threads were full of similar stories. People who had downloaded Second Sight out of curiosity, only to discover horrors lurking beneath the surface of reality. Most of them spoke of the same fate. Once you used the app, once you saw the truth, the creatures became aware of you. They couldn't touch you, not at first, but the more you looked at them, the more they began to notice you. And once they noticed you, it was only a matter of time before they found a way into your life. Ava stopped using the app. She avoided looking through her phone's camera, even for normal things, but she couldn't stop seeing them, not entirely. Sometimes, out of the corner of her eye, she'd catch a glimpse of a twisted figure lurking just out of sight. The line between what was real and what was hidden had begun to blur. Worse, she felt their presence grow stronger, like they were closing in. She finally decided to track down Jordan, convinced he knew how to stop it. After days of searching, she found him holed up in a dingy motel on the outskirts of town. He looked haggard, eyes sunken with exhaustion, like he hadn't slept in weeks. "You can't undo it," he whispered, when she asked how to stop the app. "Once you see them, once they know you can see, they never stop hunting." Ava's blood ran cold. She knew in that moment there was no escaping it. The creatures were everywhere now, watching her, hunting her. And the worst part? She hadn't even opened the app in days. But her phone had started buzzing again. Notifications from Second Sight, urging her to take another look. She knew if she did, it would be the last thing she ever saw.